outlining this four-point plan to address South Africa's myriad of economic challenges. And he says while COVID-19 has been very serious, the country does have a chance to encourage economic growth that is inclusive and transformative. So a big focus here on creating jobs for the jobless, finding work, and many other measures aimed at or hoping to create jobs. In the meantime, the 350 Rand grant that was introduced during lockdown has been extended for the unemployed for another 3 months. Let's chat now to the Director of Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute, Dr. Isobel Frye. And the big question is, how does this impact the poor? Doctor, I imagine the unemployment grant is of interest. It seems small for a whole month, but this has been a lifeline for many. Is it enough to extend it for 3 months?
Good evening. Just to correct, I do not have a doctorate, so I am just Isobel Frye. It's a very interesting question, and the 3 months is also an interesting time period. Now, in the last couple of days and weeks, there's been a lot of behind-the-scenes engagement by civil society organizations and a variety of different interest groups to government saying, please, you have to extend that which was going to come to an end at the end of October. The initial indications from Treasury were that was not going to happen, that the money was not available. And I know in the last couple of days, this has really escalated in terms of the endeavors to ask government to extend. What many people were asking for was an extension until the end of this financial year. Now, that would have come up to just under 5.8 billion Rand. In fact, with the 3 months, it comes up to 5.8 billion Rand. The amount is not much, but what we see is that it acts as a multiplier. So if you have 3 or 4 adults in a household, you can extend that 350 Rand by the number of people in the households. I think why it's an important breakthrough is that it recognizes that we're not going to be able to create employment for everybody in the immediate term. The last labour force survey indicated that 20 million adults, working age people, are now delinked from the labour market, which is significantly more than the number of formal unemployed. So while the recovery plan spoke a lot about public employment opportunities to soak up people who are not employed, we know that we're not going to be able to meet that variety, that number of unemployed people, but also we're not going to be able to add to the skill set, which is so poorly lacking. So from our research and our analysis, what we see is that by extending social grants, you're able to stimulate demand from the bottom up and therefore support township economy revitalization and those kind of real-term, real-time responses rather than waiting for the creation of a kind of decent employment, which we're not going to see happen. As Dr. Puye was saying, you're looking at a recovery rate of about a decade. Yeah. So the question is, what do we do if we want to have this marvelous economic transformation to take us beyond the recession, the unemployment, the poverty, inequality that we were in prior to the hit of COVID? What is it that we can do? And it's very clear that the kind of courage that it took for people within the cabinet to say we need to extend the social grants is where we need to find the innovation to go forward and to say this is the kind of thing that we needed to do to reconstruct after 1994. We've got another chance to reconfigure, to re-gear. Unfortunate slip there.
Ms. Frye, but to reconfigure. What happens in 3 months' time? This term relative deprivation, and it's very difficult to give something and then take it away. Do you believe government will have to eventually extend and extend and extend, and we are heading towards a basic income grant?
Many of us have been advocating for a basic income grant for many years, and in fact at NEDLAC it's one of the things that's being looked at. I think we do need to, however, be very clear that right now what we're looking at is an immediate humanitarian response, which doesn't mean that the longer term policy choices, hard choices have to be made. From my view, I would imagine that there are a number of people who are very nervous about sort of open fiscal commitment, whereas there are others that know that there is a constitutional obligation on the state. I would imagine that 3 months gives people who are crunching the numbers the opportunity to see the benefit that the multiplier has of the kind of additional grants into our economy, and to see that the investment actually pays for itself. So I think it's a slight cushioning. I think it's not a capitulation. I think it's a compromise that a lot of people are very satisfied with, as an indication of a listening state. Where we go in future, I think, depends on how well the argument is made. I also think that the voices of people who are living in destitution through organizations and associations, also the labor movement, are increasingly being heard. And it's the articulation of that to decision makers, rather than just the messaging that we're getting from ratings agencies, from big business. We need to hear from people for whom 350 Rand puts bread on the table or means the absence of any kind of food or livelihood. We do need to not mistake 350 Rand with a decent standard of living, however, as you say, but need to be looking at the kinds of multipliers. The President spoke a lot about local production, localization of procurement, how we are able to see at a generalized level that people who have access to a small amount of additional income can start using through informal economy, sort of production, manufacturing, the kinds of ways in which we can expand the economy, not from the top down, because we've seen over the last 25 years that's not going to happen, but really to support from the bottom up, because that's where the majority of our people are living and are facing the kinds of daily challenges that 350 Rand sadly makes a huge difference to.
All right, thank you very much for that analysis. So the President announcing today that extreme intervention that was only for people unemployed, not receiving any other social grant, that has been extended for at least 3 months. That was the Director of Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute, Isobel Frye. Now, after the break, we'll get some business analysis. We'll be speaking to Bonang Mahale. Is this creating a conducive environment for business to get on board and finally invest? Stay with us.